Listen up, beautiful nerds. Imagine being told that a medical treatment can save your life, but it might turn you into a cow. Not as a joke. People generally believe that after being vaccinated, they may grow horns or other animal features. And for some, that idea was way more terrifying than the disease itself. And that disease, my friends, was smallpox. Before we begin, you guys should know what smallpox is. The illness usually begins with fever, extreme fatigue, and severe body pain. Many victims describe intense pain in their backs and limbs before the rash would even appear. These painful blisters began forming across the skin. They filled with fluid, they would harden, and then they eventually burst. These blisters appeared first on your face, and then they would spread across your entire body. And it left many survivors with deep scars that they had to carry for the rest of their lives. Some survivors were permanently disfigured, and others even lost their visions. Smallpox spread very easily from person to person, especially in crowded cities. And it spread through the air. So one cough, and it was over. You, my friend, were infected. So by the 1600s and 1700s, it became one of the leading causes of death in Europe. In London alone, smallpox accounted for around 5% of death each year, and at times that number rose higher. Children, unfortunately, were especially vulnerable. Many of them didn't survive it. By the 20th century, this disease had killed an estimated 300 million people. That was more than all the wars of that century combined. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. People had noted something very curious, and it was that those who survived smallpox almost never got it again. So it seemed like surviving the disease got people immunity. The problem, of course, was obvious. In order to gain that protection, you first had to survive one of the deadliest diseases on Earth. So people started looking for a way to cheat the system, and eventually a strange medical practice began to appear. You see, imagine being told the only way to protect yourself from a deadly disease is to catch it on purpose. No antibiotics, definitely no modern hospitals, and no guarantee that you'll even survive. And yet, this is exactly what people started doing. That method was called variolation. Variolation involved basically taking material from the sores of someone who had been infected with smallpox and kind of introducing it into the body of a healthy person, usually by scratching it into the skin, which already sounds insane. So sometimes it was even blown into the nose. I honestly don't know which method sounds worse. But the goal was very simple. Expose the body to a controlled infection so that it could build up the immunity. Instead of catching it naturally, the person might develop a milder case and survive it. But of course, this became extremely controversial. Doctors were intentionally infecting healthy people with a deadly disease. Hello, I too would question it. And many critics believed it was dangerous, of course. Others believed it was immoral. Some religious leaders argued it interfered with God's will. And others just worried that it could accidentally cause outbreaks. And yet, this wasn't a new idea because variolation had already been practiced in parts of Asia, Africa, and in the Ottoman Empire. And one of the earliest accounts in colonial America came from an enslaved African man named Onesimus. He explained the practice to Cotton Mather in Boston. He described how people in his homeland used variolation to protect themselves. The idea shocked many Europeans and Americans, but it was about to spread. See, because in Europe, most doctors had never seen the procedure been performed before. But that would soon change thanks to one observant traveler, Lady Mary Wortley Montagu. A 26-year-old English noblewoman, while traveling in the Ottoman Empire, must be nice, she witnessed variolation being performed, and she was immediately fascinated, especially because she herself had gotten smallpox and survived it, and it scarred her face. She even wrote a poem about it. Her brother unfortunately died from it, so in 1718 she had her own son variolated. She basically began advocating for the practice once she returned to Europe, and in 1721 she had her own daughter variolated in Europe. She was basically at this point like, you get variolation and you get variolation, everybody gets variolation. So her actions gained a lot of attention, and some people were actually very curious. Others, however, were horrified. Dun 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 dun. And this is where it starts getting darker, because doctors wanted proof that variolation worked. Stories weren't enough. They wanted evidence. So they ran experiments. And who did they turn to, my friends? They turned to prisoners. So in 1721, doctors in Britain tested variolation at Newgate prison. And basically they took 6 prisoners who had already been sentenced to death. And they were basically offered a deal. And they said, be intentionally infected with smallpox, and if you survive, you will walk free. Now imagine that. You're sitting in a prison cell, you know you're about to die, and suddenly there's a chance, a risky one, but still a chance, my friends. So for them, the choice was simple. They agreed. I would agree too. So doctors performed the procedure. One by one, the prisoners developed symptoms, but the cases remained relatively mild. And eventually, guess what? All 6 of them survived. And true to their promise, they were released. So to the doctors, this looked like a success. Variolation began spreading more widely. Now, the problem was that often it was performed on people with little power to refuse, like prisoners, orphans, the poor, children. And although it sometimes worked, it was still dangerous. It was a deadly disease. Some people developed the smallpox, the full smallpox, and some died. So the search for something safer continued. Later in the 18th century, an English physician man named Edward Jenner noticed something strange. Milkmaids, the women who dealt with the cattle, who caught cowpox, rarely got smallpox. So cowpox is related to smallpox, but much milder. It usually causes minor symptoms. So today, we now know that cowpox, monkeypox, and smallpox are all part of the same virus family. But for years, people didn't know this. And for years, people had noticed the pattern, though. Milkmaids who worked with cows, who would get these small sores on their hands, which was, of course, unpleasant, but not deadly. They were not getting the smallpox. So some people even joked that the milkmaids had the clearest skin in the countryside because they avoided the scars from the smallpox. And Jenner didn't think that this was a coincidence. He thought cowpox might protect against the smallpox. But, of course, belief was not enough. And, of course, he needed proof. And this is where it gets dark, because Jenner performed one of the most famous experiments in medical history. He took material from a cowpox sore on a milkmaid's hand, and he inoculated an 8-year-old boy. A child. His name was James Phipps, and he was the son of Jenner's gardener. Now, let's pause here for a second, because this is a child. He had no idea what was happening to him. He had no understanding of the risk, and he had no ability to consent, and yet he is being used for a medical experiment. Jenner infects him with cowpox. The boy becomes mildly ill, but then he recovers. Good thing that he recovers. Then weeks later, Jenner exposes him to smallpox, which I may remind you is a very deadly disease. If Jenner was wrong, the boy could have died, but the boy doesn't get sick. He continued testing this method on other children. I don't understand why we couldn't test adults, including his own son. And while reactions varied, the outcome was basically the same. And it was that protection against smallpox. It worked. So Jenner had discovered something huge, a safer way to protect people. He called it vaccination, from the Latin word vacca. Vacca meaning cow. But not everyone was convinced. You see, vaccination sparked serious backlash. It still does today. Some people believed injecting material from cows into the human body was unnatural. Others feared it would cause mutations. Pamphlets claimed people could grow horns or developed animal features. Some generally believed that vaccine could turn humans into cows. One famous cartoon from 1802 showed people growing cow parts out of their bodies, tiny cow bursting from their arms and faces. And look, I know that sounds ridiculous now, but at the time they didn't understand medicine the way that we do now. I would be scared too, wouldn't you? And early anti-vaccine movement spread fear through newspapers, pamphlets, and satire, which some of us know too well. But despite all of this, vaccination spread, and doctors kept studying, campaigns expanded, and slowly cases actually began to drop. By the 20th century, smallpox had been reduced in many countries, but it still existed in parts of Africa and Asia. So eradicating it completely almost seemed impossible. But in 1976, the World Health Organization launched a global campaign with one goal and one goal only: eliminate smallpox. Be gone, you monster. A new strategy was introduced. When someone got infected, health workers traced those contacts and vaccinated them and the surrounding area. They were basically creating a ring of protection. This became known as ring vaccination, and it worked. So instead of trying to vaccinate everyone, which seemed impossible and there weren't just enough vaccines to do that, they created these rings around the infected people. And it worked, right? Outbreaks began disappearing one by one. The last natural case of smallpox was in Somalia in 1977. One major reason why it worked, why we were able to eradicate it, is because smallpox only infects humans. So it cannot jump from human to animal, animal to human. So it had nowhere to hide once we basically stopped the spread between people. It was over. You gotta go, smallpox. So at last, my friend, what was once one of humanity's greatest fears and greatest killer was gone. Smallpox killed hundreds of millions of people, unfortunately. But through science, cooperation, and controversial experimentation, humanity did achieve something incredible. And it all started with one terrifying idea. What if infecting ourselves with the disease could actually save us? Here's one twist before you go, my beautiful friends, because smallpox isn't completely gone. What? The virus still exists, locked away in 2 high security labs, one in the United States and one in Russia. Carefully guarded, carefully studied, and hopefully never needed again. Thank you for watching, my beautiful friends. I am Glory from Archives of the Centuries. Stay safe, stay weird, stay curious. I'll see you in the archives, my historian friends.